Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're jumping way back to explore the ancient origins of humanity's absolute most enduring survival story. We're going to unearth a tale that literally laid the blueprint for narratives billions of people still recognize today. It's a story of creation, of the dawn of civilization, and, most famously, of catastrophic, world-ending destruction. So get ready, because we are diving into the Eridu Genesis. Now, what if I told you the oldest apocalypse story in history started simply because humanity was being too loud? I mean, it sounds almost like a sitcom plot, doesn't it? A grumpy neighbor upstairs banging a broom on the ceiling. But as you'll see, to the ancient Sumerians, this incredibly relatable, maybe slightly absurd inciting incident is exactly what brought the world to the brink of total annihilation. Let's let the narrative spell of this incredible myth just wash right over us. Okay, let's dive into Section 1, Discovering the Eridu Genesis, piecing together a fragmented mystery. So we don't just have a perfectly bound book that got handed down through the millennia. Actually, scratch that, it's more like a giant puzzle. It took some incredible detective work over the centuries, because this story is mostly known from fragments. Around 1600 BC, the Nippur and fragments were written down in Sumerian. Fast forward 1,000 years to 600 BC, and a bilingual fragment was placed in the legendary library of Ashurbanipal. But it wasn't really until 1893 that a University of Pennsylvania expedition unearthed the primary tablet in Nippur. Then, in 1912, Arno Pobel finally recognized what they had actually found. And get this, the history is literally still being written. As recently as 2018, a brand new fragment of this story was published. Now, tantalizingly, the first 36 lines of the main Nippur tablet are still lost to history. Scholars kind of infer these missing lines talked about humankind's wild nomadic existence before civilization kicked in.
Moving right along to Section 2, From Nomads to Cities, the Dawn of Civilization.
When the surviving text does finally pick up, we are witnessing the literal dawn of civilization. The goddess Nintur calls humans away from their roaming, nomadic existence to build cities, and she sets a very specific progression into motion. She provides humanity with kingship and organization, explicitly naming the very first cities established by the gods. It all begins with Eridu, which is where the myth gets its name, and Nintur placed its leadership under the god Enki. This is followed by Bad Tibera, Larak, Sipar, and finally Shuruppak. The gods basically laid the geographic groundwork for civilization as we know it, setting up these very first hubs of human gathering in ancient Mesopotamia. Now, what's absolutely fascinating here is how these early humans were organized. The text points out that these first cities were set up as distributive economies. Just think about that for a second. This is an economic system operating entirely without money. Zero. Instead, goods are collected and distributed centrally. So the myth isn't just telling us a cool story about gods and magic, it's giving us a socioeconomic snapshot of how early humans imagined the perfect, orderly society right before everything went completely wrong. Which brings us to Section 3, the noisy human flood. The gods lose sleep. Because, of course, things do go wrong. As humans thrive and our populations grow, we create this massive flood of noise. And this kicks off a cosmic drama between two opposing divine forces. On one side, we have Enlil. He's the master of the universe, ruling from way up high in the cosmic freshwater ocean. He is completely unable to sleep because of the human racket, and his reaction is, well, extreme. He decides to destroy all of humanity with a massive flood. But on the other side, we have Enki, who you might remember was given leadership of Eridu earlier. Enki is super sympathetic to us. He decides to rebel against Enlil's harsh decree by tipping off a single human, a priest named Ziusudra. So Enki warns Ziusudra, who happens to be the ruler of the city of Shuruppak, turning him instantly into the ultimate protagonist of our survival narrative. Enki's warning is crystal clear. Build a boat to save yourself and one couple of every living creature. Unfortunately, another missing section of the clay tablet means the exact step-by-step construction manual for this magnificent boat has been totally lost to time. But Ziusudra listens, he builds the boat, and he boards it with his family and the animals. And then, the gods unleash the flood. 7. That is the number of days and the number of nights that a terrifying apocalyptic storm rages across the land. 7 days of relentless, punishing destruction designed to wipe the slate of humanity completely clean. As the ancient text resumes from a break, it delivers this incredibly haunting line. The huge boat had been tossed about on the great waters. Just imagine the sheer terror of that experience for a second. Trapped inside a wooden vessel, the entirety of your known world submerged beneath the waves, tossed violently on an endless churning sea by gods who were literally just tired of hearing you speak. The stakes of this deluge are absolute. But finally, the storm breaks. Let's look at the immediate aftermath. First, Utu, the sun, appears piercing right through those apocalyptic clouds. Second, Ziusudra opens a window on the boat and immediately drops to the floor, prostrating himself in reverence. And third, to give massive thanks for surviving the literal end of the world, Ziusudra sacrifices an ox and a sheep. The flood is officially over.
For his unwavering loyalty and for preserving the animals and the seed of mankind, Ziusudra gets the ultimate reward. He bows before An, the sky god, and Enlil. Yep, the very same god who just tried to destroy him. They grant Ziusudra breath eternal, basically immortality. In one specific version of the epic, instead of the boat landing on a mountain, it actually floats down the Euphrates River into the Persian Gulf, and the gods send Ziusudra to live in the country of Dilmun, this mythical paradise where the sun rises. All right, let's pivot a bit here for Section 4, Tracing the Real Flood, Grounding the Myth in Reality. Now we're going to execute a sudden perspective shift from the fascinating fantasy of the myth to hard, cold archaeological facts. Because here is the kicker. The Sumerians weren't entirely making this up. Modern scholars, including Kim Sun-hae, believe the Sumerian deluge story actually corresponds to a massive, localized river flooding. The mythic deluge matches up perfectly with actual layers of riverine sediments that physically interrupt human settlement in the region. The mythic city of Shuruppak, where our guy Ziusudra ruled, that corresponds to modern-day Tel Farah in Iraq. And that mythical pre-flood era, radiocarbon dating places this massive flood event right around 2900 BCE. The literal dirt beneath modern-day Iraq proves that a real-world flood totally interrupted these ancient civilizations. There is a thick layer of riverine sediment that extends from Shuruppak all the way north to the city of Kish. And to definitively lock in the timeline, archaeologists found polychrome pottery from the Jemdet Nasr period, which dates from 3000 to 2900 BCE, sitting immediately below this flood stratum. So while we haven't found historical verification for the legendary pre-flood kings, the catastrophic flood they supposedly preceded is an undeniable geological fact. So the crucial point here is, why does this all matter to us today? Well, because the Sumerians took this very real, historical trauma, a devastating flood around 2900 BCE, and processed it through storytelling. The Eridu Genesis became the master blueprint. Its themes of a divine council, a sympathetic god, a chosen survivor, an ark, and a world-cleansing flood, they all exhibit striking parallels with later stories. The idea spread like wildfire. It shaped the Babylonian Atrahasis, it deeply influenced the Epic of Gilgamesh, and researchers have long agreed it heavily influenced the emergence of the flood narrative in the Hebrew Bible. This one localized flood in ancient Iraq rippled out to shape the mythologies of major world religions. Which brings us to our final thought for today. This explainer really shows how an ancient people transformed a terrifying natural disaster into a myth of survival and divine intervention that has endured for millennia. So if a local flood in 2900 BCE sparked a myth that lasted thousands of years, what stories will our modern natural disasters leave behind for the people of the future? It's pretty amazing how we process trauma through storytelling, isn't it? Thank you so much for exploring the Eridu Genesis with me, and keep seeking out the structures behind the stories.